Okay, first of all, there won't be any visuals or images in this video because I wanted this to be, feeling a little more like a, real conversation, something that lets us think carefully without distractions. So, no images. And it's just going to be my voice and a dark screen, like you see, and an honest discussion about what happened with Huening Kai of TXT and the reaction that followed and what it says about K-pop culture as a whole. So actually, it's more about the K-pop culture, traditional K-pop culture in Korea, rather than Huening Kai. That's just a conversation starter, you can think of it as. So yeah, this isn't a gossip video or a recap of a scandal. In fact, I don't even think what happened should have been a scandal in the first place. But the way it unfolded and the kind of conversations it sparked online and what it reveals a lot about the parasocial expectations still baked into the K-pop industry in Korea. Okay, so let's talk about it calmly, without noise, without sensationalism, just the issue itself. So, tomorrow by together, TXT member Huning Kai personally addressed recent dating rumors that surfaced online, and he did that through the DM messages. So, on October 10th, he posted a long message on Weverse to the fans who used the DM service, saying that he felt sorry toward fans and wanted to speak honestly instead of avoiding the issue. And the rumors began after a video spread online showing Huening Kai in a car with someone. And in the clip, he appeared to be helping a woman who seemed to be intoxicated, leading to speculation about a romantic relationship. And Huening Kai clarified that the woman was someone he knew and that he couldn't just leave her in that state. So he made sure she got home safely before returning straight to the dorm, his dorm. And he explained that it happened during the holidays when most places were closed, so they ended up at one of the few spots still open. So he apologized for making fans worry. And he also shared his feelings, saying that he doesn't like causing trouble for his members and usually stays home. But since it was a friend he hadn't seen in a long time, he decided to meet up. And he admitted that he thought a lot about what to do after the situation unfolded. So let me translate his message in full. He said, or he wrote, "I feel really sorry toward Moa. Moa is a fandom name. And I don't even know why I should avoid talking about it, so I will just say it. I was with someone I know, and in that situation, I couldn't just leave her there. I took her to her home and came straight back to the dorm. Since it was a holiday, everything was closed, so we went to one of the few places left open. I have always hated causing any trouble for the members since debut, and I'm a total homebody, so I usually never go out. But since it was a friend I hadn't seen in a long time, I decided to meet up. When the situation happened, I kept thinking about what I should do, but I couldn't just leave her, so I quickly took her home and returned to the dorm. That's what happened. I'm really sorry for making you worry. I hate lying, and I just wanted to be honest with you. I think this situation caused a lot of misunderstanding, but there's nothing for Moa to worry about. I want to focus more on my work and on Moa. I feel so sorry if I hurt Moa, the members, or the staff. I don't know how this message will be received, but if it doesn't come across properly, I'm truly sorry. I wanted to be someone you can trust, but I feel like I didn't live up to that, and I'm really sorry. To me, the members, Moa, and my family come before myself. I don't care what happens to me, but I feel truly sorry for making Moa upset. If there's anything lacking in how I talk, please tell me everything. I will fix it all. There are so many things I need to work on. I'm sure there will be a lot to fix. Sorry for sending such a long message in the middle of the night. Please get some rest." Now, this whole situation with TXT Huning Kai I think it's a perfect example of how parasocial expectations can get out of hand in the K-pop industry in Korea. Because like, let's be clear about what actually happened. A young man was seen helping someone he knows get home safely, and the reaction online was explosive enough that he felt compelled to post a long emotional apology at what, like 2:32 in the morning. And that alone says a lot. And what stood out most to me wasn't even the incident itself, but the language of his post. I mean, don't get me wrong. I know how he's such a sweetheart, sweet soul, kind-hearted soul, Huening Kai is. But something about his message bothered me because it says a lot about the industry and the culture. Like he wasn't just explaining; he was apologizing over and over, like for existing in a situation outside of work. And he said things like, I don't know why I should avoid talking about it, or I feel sorry for making you worry. And the members, Moa, and my family come before me. And this isn't the kind of language most people would ever feel pressure to use over something like, giving a friend a ride home. But for an idol, is practically expected. And this is where the parasocial layer of K-pop becomes uncomfortably clear. In many fan communities, the unspoken rule still is that idols must be emotionally available but romantically unattached. And fans don't just support the music. They feel, a lot of them, or some of them, feel entitled to a part of the artist's personal life. Or more accurately, the absence of it. And when something happens that disrupts the fantasy of single devoted idol, the reaction could be brutal, right? Especially online. And even if most fans are understanding, the problem is the few who aren't can shape the entire narrative. And what makes it worse is that the industry structure itself, K-pop companies used to build these parasocial bonds intentionally. And they market artists not only as performers, but as emotionally accessible figures you can feel close to. And over time, some fans start to blur the line between performer and personal possession. And when reality doesn't match the fantasy, some lash out. And that creates a cycle. An idol is human and does something normal, but a small groups of fans overreact, and the rumors spread, and the idol feels obligated to explain or even apologize. And other fans rush to defend them, or some antis pretend that they're fans and attack them. And the incident turns into a storm, when in any other industry, it wouldn't even register as news. You know what I'm saying? And speaking of news, in Korean entertainment media, dating rumors are treated almost like political scandals. They're covered with the same breathless tone as major news. And outlets use suggestive wording and vague sources and some blurry screenshots to build a narrative that isn't even confirmed. And by the time the idol or agency responds, the story has already taken on a life of its own. And what's left is this headline, idol caught up in dating rumors. And that alone is enough to trigger waves of speculation, commentary, and judgment. And why does this happen? Because sensationalism sells. We've been talking about this, right? Dating rumors bring traffic, and traffic brings ad money. And that's the reality, sadly. And because the idol economy thrives on maintaining, carefully constructed public images, the media knows that these stories will, hit a nerve. So it's a cycle that rewards escalation, not accuracy necessarily. So instead of simply reporting, the journalists lean on loaded language, words like caught or spotted with, or romantic outing. And these phrases sound like journalism, but they're actually emotional bait because they feed on the same possessiveness that parasocial fandom encourages. And fans who are already conditioned to feel close to their idols react. And this is why I think incidents like Huening Kai's this issue spiral so fast, because a simple and private moment becomes like tabloid fuel. And that becomes viral social chatter. And viral chatter pressures idols to explain themselves because from their perspectives, that's what everybody seems to be talking about. And then, ironically, the media reports again, now on the idol's response and statement. So it's not just one story, it becomes an entire multi-step content pipeline. And the worst part is that this cycle punishes honesty. If an idol is seen with someone and doesn't respond immediately, headlines, read like idol silence amid rumors, implying guilt. If they deny it, though, they're accused of hiding something. If they explain themselves, it gets framed as idol addresses controversy, as if they have done something wrong. So there's no winning there. The narrative always benefits the media first. So, yeah, super unfortunate. There's also a cultural fact here. In Korea, idol dating scandals are still treated like legitimate controversies. Like the idea that a celebrity, like, how should I say this? So, okay. The idea that a celebrity might be in a relationship is often framed as a betrayal. I think betrayal is the right word of fans. Something to be hidden or denied or apologized for. But of course, internationally, the reaction is more mixed. Many global fans are tired of the cycle. They recognize that idols are human beings with personal lives, and that's what a lot of my subscribers comment about. But they also see how the the fandom culture and the structure of the K-pop industry, the traditional one, encourages this kind of fan entitlement in the first place. And I think that's what's so heartbreaking about Huening Kai's post, because he wasn't defending himself like a public figure caught in wrongdoing. He was actually comforting his fans like someone, being scared the fans might leave him. And he said, I want to be someone you can trust, as if trust should even be at stake here. You know what I'm saying? We're talking about, how old is Huening Kai? Hold on. Huening Kai. Isn't he in like early 20s? 23, yeah. It's like, this is a 22-year-old artist apologizing for being a friend to someone. And that's not just unfair. I think it's a sign of how warped the power dynamic can become between idols and their fandoms. And to be clear, this isn't necessarily about bad fans, because many fans are incredibly supportive and mature and protective. I would like to believe that this is the case in all fandoms. The majority of the fans are nice people. The real problem is the minority and the system that normalizes this level of access and emotional control. Idols grow up in an environment where they're taught to maintain a perfect image at all times, not just as artists, but as people who belong to their fandom. And I think that could be dangerous because it strips them of a basic level of humanity and personal freedom. And I believe that if K-pop as an industry truly wants to evolve, like the Korean government wants it to, this has to change. And this is something that needs attention, as much as like the Korean government trying to build a huge concert venue. You know what I'm saying? If they want K-pop to be sustainable. Because, I don't know, from my perspective at least, artists should not have to apologize for living their lives. I mean, fans can love their favorite groups deeply without expecting them to be like single or pure or constantly available. It is possible to care about an artist's career without owning their private life. At least that's what I think. And honestly, international fans have a huge role to play in shifting that culture as K-pop goes abroad and grows. Because the more people reject this parasocial entitlement, I think the less power those toxic narratives will have. And I still think what Huening Kai wrote shouldn't have been necessary. It is sweet and super gentle, and I know some fans are proud of the way he responded, like in a very direct manner. And yes, I believe that his kindness and honesty were admirable. But the fact that he felt forced to say it in the first place shows just how much pressure these young artists live under. I mean, after all, they're not dolls, and they're not fictional characters. They're people. And if we truly care about them, the best thing we can do is give them space to be exactly that, just people, humans. And interestingly, if you read the like a comment section from Toku, for example, one of current online communities in Korea, it shows how parasocial culture and moral policing play out in real time when a dating rumor type story breaks in K-pop. And honestly, it shows why the conversation around something like this, it should be more about the entire machinery around idols and fans and media narratives. Like one of the first things that I noticed when I read the comments is how quickly some commenters treated the situation like a moral failure, not just a misunderstanding. Some wrote things like, "It must be hard being an idol, LOL," or something like, "I hate how careless that was," or "How can he claim to put fans first when he's drinking with the woman at 5 a.m.?" Again, none of these are about evidence of wrongdoing. They're about personal expectations of how an idol should behave. Like the late hour, the fact that the friend was drunk and that it was a woman were enough for some people to interpret it as a betrayal of their imagined relationship with them. You know what I'm saying? And again, this is the core of parasocial culture and K-pop. Idols are expected to perform not just on stage, but in their private lives. Like a normal night out with a friend is dissected like a breach of contract or something. And some fans talk as if he owes them emotional fidelity. And some comments don't even talk about what actually happened. They talk about how they feel. Like, for example, I read a comment like, I get why people are leaving the fandom or something, or "I would leave too." These comments appear repeatedly. Again, these might not be legitimate fans. They might be antis, pretending they're fans. But perfect example of a parasocial relationship, as if this is a breakup or something. And another pattern is a performative outrage that thrives in these spaces, online spaces. Like commenters pile on because outrage creates a shared sense of righteousness. Some people, like I said, clearly aren't even fans. They're just enjoying the spectacle. Some haters say, or some commenters say things like, "Thank God it's not my idol," or they say things in a very mocking tone, or exaggerate fan reactions. And they also feed into the viral nature of these controversies. And it's also telling how easily rumors like spiral into moral narratives. Like someone mentioned in the comments, something like the video being spread around. Like fans lied, saying it was his sister, Huening Kai's sister, which turned the rumor into a moral play about honesty and betrayal, not by Huening Kai but by fans themselves. That was also interesting, and that creates an internal war within the fandom, right? Those who want to defend him versus those who see defending as delusional or humiliating. And that's how fan communities fracture. Of course, at the same time, others take a step back. There are some different commenters like pointing out how exaggerated the whole thing is. Some people say it's not like he committed a crime. It's such an overreaction. And something like it just looks like him helping a drunk friend. It shows a more grounded perspective. But these voices often get buried beneath waves of heated emotional takes. And on websites like Toku, the loudest comments often shape the narrative, not the most rational ones. Not that I care about Toku at all. So what's also interesting is how monetary power gets brought up. So several comments talk about named vendor, like big name or influential fans, usually high spenders or fan accounts with high followers, big followers. And there's an unspoken understanding that their reaction matters more because they financially sustain the group's commercial success. And that adds another layer of pressure because this isn't just about fans' feelings. It's also about who holds economic power in the fandom. So when they talk about whether like big spenders are leaving, they're essentially talking about the group's bottom line, which is weirdly interesting. So, and also we can't ignore the role of media here. Again, none of these comments would exist without the initial framing of this incident as a dating rumor. And the way the rumor was labeled and distributed created the environment for this discourse, the conversation. And the fans are reacting entirely to a narrative already shaped by how the clip was circulated and reported. And I think the whole thread that I'm looking at is a perfect example of how, again, parasocial expectations, media framing, and fan community dynamics intertwine. And I also want to point out that international fans sometimes look at these meltdowns and wonder, why is this even a controversy, right? But inside Korea, this kind of response is baked into the way idol culture has been structured for decades. And I think we can talk about this. So fan culture in Korea still has some deeply toxic patterns, but it's also true that it has changed a lot over the years. If you look back at the late 90s and early 2000s, like the early days of first and second generation idol groups, the kind of behavior that was considered normal back then would be unthinkable for many fans today. So when international fans criticize parasocial culture, they often paint like Korean fans as a single toxic block, which could be both unfair and inaccurate. To actually move the culture forward, I think it's crucial to understand why many domestic fans hold these expectations in the first place, and how those expectations are rooted in history and economics and identity, not just personal possessiveness. So, for example, for decades, the K-pop fan system has been built on intense emotional and financial investments. Like long before K-pop became a global business, long before HYBE, long before BTS, domestic fans were the lifeblood of idols' careers, right? And they weren't just buying albums. They were organizing fan cafes, running streaming projects, or showing up at every schedule, and sending food trucks to music shows, and creating entire grassroots infrastructures that labels relied on. And in that ecosystem, the sense of personal connection wasn't just cultivated by the industry. It was actually a key part of how fandom operated. And I think many older or more traditional fans spent years pouring their time, their money, and emotional energy into their artist. And for them, the relationship is deeply personal because they've been told again and again that their loyalty is what keeps the artist going. So when an idol says things like, "You're the reason I can stand on stage," it's not just fan service. it reinforces a long-standing emotional quote unquote contract, right? So when that image cracks, they don't see it as a casual moment. They see it as a rupture, so to say, and something they have been asked to sustain. Of course, this doesn't mean every reaction is justified, but there's a difference between feeling hurt or disappointed and acting entitled. But acknowledging where those feelings come from might be the first step toward building a more honest dialogue. So yes, in the past, parasocial expectations were even more extreme. There were widespread incidents of fans following idols to their dorms, sending blood letters, like physically staking out airports or homes for days, and openly declaring ownership of idols. So yeah, the infamous 사생 fan culture or 사생 culture. So yeah, there's a consensus that we shouldn't regard 사생 as fans, right? But that culture was a large, visible part of the fandom back in the days. Like idols had far fewer boundaries, and companies often didn't protect them well. And what's worse is that at the time, these behaviors weren't even universally condemned. And a lot of it was actually romanticized or brushed off as like passionate love. And companies often tolerated it because intense fan devotion translated into album sales, fan club memberships, and guaranteed crowds at every schedule. And I think in that environment, idols had almost no personal space at all. And again, dating rumors back then were considered like career-ending events for some idols. If someone was seen holding hands with a partner or spotted with a non-family member of the opposite sex, it could literally tank their public image overnight. And that's why, seeing someone like Huening Kai post a late night explanation, while still frustrating in how much emotional labor he has to do, it's also a reflection of a shifting fan culture. If you look at it from a different perspective, because a decade ago, a situation like this would likely have led to far more aggressive backlash and large-scale organized boycotts and possibly a forced official statement from the agency. But now we are seeing something a bit different. Yeah, there's still outrage, unfortunately and sadly, and stressfully, but there are also a lot of fans, both domestic and international, pushing back and calling the overreaction out, calling it out for what it is. And I think online discourse has also changed. Like on platforms, you can clearly see two voices coexisting. Those still clinging to the old possessive fan mentality, and those who see idols as adults who have every right to live normal lives. And I think the fact that this debate is even happening, that a big part of the fandom is saying he didn't do anything wrong, is pretty significant progress, compared to where the industry used to be. And again, I think internationalization has played a big role in that shift. As K-pop has expanded globally, fan culture has diversified, and not all fans share the same expectations anymore. And while some Korean fans still prioritize emotional closeness and idealize purity, I think international fans often approach idols more like celebrities or artists, still with affection, but not necessarily with the same personal ownership mindset. This could create friction, but also pressure for the old norms to evolve. And companies have also slowly gotten better at drawing lines. They issue stronger statements against stalking or set clear schedules, right? And sometimes even push back against fans when necessary. And I think HYBE is good at that. And speaking of which, I think BTS paved the way in this regard as well, because BTS went globally successful with a lot of international fans, especially US based. The fandom became diversified, and it makes the traditional K-pop fans to rethink about their relationship with their idols, with their artists, right? So yeah, because 20 years ago, idols often had to simply endure abuse or keep their relationships a complete secret. But now, at least, there's a growing understanding, among fans and the industry that personal boundaries are legitimate. But again, we still have a long way to go, and I think incidents like Huening Kai's issue show how fragile that progress can be, because a single video can still unleash like tons of moral judgments, as if an idol owes their private lives to the fandom. And there's still a portion of fans who genuinely believe that being an idol means being emotionally available to them 24/7, and the media still feeds off that mindset, exploiting it for clicks. And I think like for real change to take place, certain things need to keep evolving. Like, for example, fandom maturity. Fans need to move further away from ownership and closer to support. You can love someone's music and admire their personality and still let them live their life. You know what I'm saying? And also about the media. Media accountability. Outlets need to stop framing personal moments as scandals. Not everything needs to be treated like breaking news. You know what I'm saying? And companies also need to actively defend idols from overblown narratives instead of forcing them to handle it emotionally on their own. But I'd like to hear from you too. But yeah, one thing I wanted to emphasize in this video is that global expansion actually gives the industry an opportunity to accelerate this change. International fans, again, don't share the same dating taboos as some parts of the domestic fandom. And your pushback matters. And as a fan base diversifies, the loudest parasocial voices no longer represent the entire audience. And that creates leverage for agencies to set the healthier norms. And if the industry chooses to use it, that leverage could fundamentally reshape the landscape. And at the heart of it all, maybe dating has to be normalized as well. Like accepted as an ordinary part of human life. Of course, idols or artists are still professionals, so they have to manage their lives well, but just doing their ordinary human things, it should be accepted as ordinary part of human life. Idols should not have to live in fear of a single blurry video that leads to dating rumors, and they should not have to apologize for giving someone a ride home, and they should not have to choose between their personal lives and their careers. So yeah, after all, we're no longer in the era where dating rumors automatically end careers. And that alone is huge, I think. But still, the foundation of K-pop's parasocial ecosystem hasn't fully shifted yet, I don't think. It's just cracked a bit. And how the industry and fans and media handle cases like this one will determine whether those cracks widen into real change or get patched up just enough for the same cycle to repeat. But I believe that we're making progress. In fact, pretty significantly. And I think HYBE artists and HYBE are contributing to these changes for better. So let's open this up to you guys. What do you think idols actually owe their fans? Like what do they actually owe, if anything, when it comes to their personal lives? Do you think? Do you believe the industry should be responsible for setting clear boundaries? Or should it be on fans to mature and adjust their expectations over time? And if K-pop truly wants to grow as a global industry, what kind of cultural shift do you think needs to happen first? Media accountability, or company transparency, or fan culture's evolution? And are we as an international community truly ready to accept idols as ordinary young people with ordinary lives? Or are we still clinging to parts of the fantasy ourselves? Leave your thoughts in the comment section. And as always, let's stay positive respectful, and classy. Thank you guys. Peace, love. Bye bye.